As I'm going deeper into my understanding of what the future holds for us, I'm thrilled to have with me Rohan Murty, who has a PhD in computer science from Harvard, a BS from Cornell, and was a postdoctoral fellow at MIT. His research on distributed systems and his thesis on white space networking has won multiple awards and fellowships, resulting in published papers and patents. He was also a junior fellow at the Society of Fellows at Harvard, which includes amongst its fellows Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. He was also the second computer scientist selected to the society in its 80 plus year history. Rohan is also the founder of the Murthy Classical Library of India, a nonprofit on a 100 plus year mission to showcase Indian classics of the past 2 millennia to the world. Billed as one of the largest and most complex translation efforts in the world, MCLI has been featured in the New York Times, Bloomberg, Forbes, and many, many others. He is currently running Soroco, an AI-based platform, which we're going to talk to him about in much more detail as we delve into this conversation. Firstly, Rohan Murty, thank you so much for doing this, and we're really looking forward to your views on what the future holds for us.
Great, thanks, Vibha.
All right, terrific. So, Rohan, just to set the context of this conversation, as someone starts listening in on this podcast and wonders why think about the future, why from your lens and as you build Soroco, why is it important to keep a pulse on the future?
Well, I mean, it's not just building any company, right? I mean, it's no matter what you do, you always want to have a sense of how the world will move, and therefore, what are you doing at this point in time, and how does that necessarily fit into that larger narrative? I was very young when I encountered the internet for the first time, and perhaps I was in fourth or fifth standard, and I saw it somewhere outside in India. I can't remember where exactly. And there was this much older person who was showing it to me, and then I remember asking him, "What does this mean to us?" And then, because I was just, in school, right? And he said, "Hey, in the future, you will read your books here, and you will watch videos here, you will buy from here." And I thought, what? Does that mean we won't go to stores and so on? And it's just, I mean, I didn't really know anything. But the idea that someone could tell me that this future will be quite different than the reality I was living in was tremendously exciting, right? And we continue to live in times that are always like that. And so I feel like no matter what, you always want to at least have a sense of how the world might change. And in some cases, you can do something about it, and you can do something to prepare for it. In other cases, you're going on the ride. So I think no matter what, it's important to have an eye on where the world will possibly move.
Okay, great. So it's important to keep a pulse on the future and maybe sometimes be a part of that future and see how you want to participate in what future is sort of coming up.
Right.
Okay, terrific. Okay, since your expertise is science and technology and AI, I'm going to delve largely into that area. Where do you see an AI-led world taking us? How is AI really going to impact our lives at work, outside of work? There's so much buzz about it. There's so much talk about it. As you said, like, would you really be reading books on your Kindle? Would you be buying on retail? On a very practical note, where is AI going to take us in the next even 5 years?
I actually think that I don't know. And I don't know only because the pace of change and innovation is incredibly high. At least in my limited uh, sort of the time I've had in my career so far, I have never seen anything move at this pace of innovation as what we're witnessing right now. And that's why it's so hard to predict where the future will lie in this specific area. But I'll give you a sense of what, at least how I think about it. I think fundamentally what the current innovation has done is it has permanently, and it will change even more, but permanently changed humanity's relationship with, among other things, with words. And that's actually a very deep thing because all our recorded history is in words. We communicate with words. I mean, words are pretty much, they form the basis for a lot of what humankind does. And now you have machines that can generate these words, can seemingly, I underline the word seemingly, understand the relationship between these different words, can generate these words in an order and a sequence that makes it seem very believable and interesting, intuitive, creative, etc., and so on. That is the real, in some sense, that's the big, and then you can extend a relationship with words, a relationship with pixels, and therefore images and videos, etc., and so on and so forth. Um, and so when you start looking through the lens of something as fundamental as this, right? Where do we use words every day in our lives? I mean, we read documents. People have, for example, if you're in legal profession, certainly the younger folks in legal read documents, summarize documents. All of that, a machine will do quite well. If you're in a bank, there are a bunch of activities that you're doing that a machine can help you in a way that it could previously never do so. If you're in education, um, um, you have content now, or you will have content that will be generated in ways that previously was unimaginable. You could never go to a machine and ask it a long descriptive question and it answers in this way that your teacher perhaps would, etc., etc. And I mean, you can go on and on and on and on and on. So the point is, the lens that I often use, for all of this is, okay, where do we use words? And then I try and imagine a future where if I use that as a sniff test, and then I say, okay, this is perhaps where AI will change everything. But I don't know exactly, because there may be other crazy innovations around the corner that will change more and more and more, that escapes my imagination at this point in time. So I'm very
You're saying
hesitant
it's,
to.
it's visuals, it's audio, it's essentially what everything we're perceiving, right? We perceive words and we perceive images around us. And you say AI is going to fundamentally shift that sense of perception then for us.
Yeah, but I deliberately pick words, only because I think, like kids learn to read from a young age. I think it's something very tangible that people can immediately relate to, and it's not as abstract. But it's true for these other forms of information or communication, like images and video and audio, etc., and so on and so on.
Okay, so that's sort of our primary medium of making sense of the world, right? For the generation that we've seen, like I'm reading off a document as I speak to you, and you're
Yeah,
saying,
yeah,
yes, fundamentally going to shift my medium itself.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay, so how I make sense of the world will fundamentally shift.
Yeah, and I mean, and then there are these extraordinary things that I don't even know how they fit into all of this. I'll give you another example. So my uncle is a professor of astrophysics at Caltech. He's been running a project for the last at least 10 years, which has used AI algorithms to automate the discovery of the universe. So they have these telescopes that are automatically discovering and making discoveries, inferences, and then even writing parts of a paper,
Wow.
presumably at least. Um, and that's quite crazy for me, because essentially if you think about it, one of the oldest human activities from the earliest times has been to look up at the night sky and wonder about our place in the universe, right? I mean, that's why the oldest paintings have been about the sky and people perceiving images of animals in the sky and so on and so forth. And now we are saying, look, there's a machine that can do that, right? I don't even know how that fits into this words or pixels or whatever and so on, but it is quite crazy. And so, I suspect we'll continue to see more and more and more things that we just previously thought was unimaginable being done by machines.
Okay, terrific. And for something like that, you probably need years of study and research and expertise that now a
Yes.
machine can.
Yes, absolutely. See, you could treat all of this as a black box and just be a consumer of it, right? And say, oh, okay, I'll use this, which is fine. But so when I was in middle school, I read a book. So, and by the way, I hope I'm not digressing too much. You can cut me off if I am. I read, Isaac Asimov's Foundation series for the very first time. And in the very first book, they talk of this large galactic empire where there's this planet, and this mathematician lands up there and he thinks it's very grand. And then there's somebody with him who says, no, look, here's the critique. We have all these extraordinary machinery and feats of engineering, but the truth is we have lost the knowledge to understand how any of these things work. And that's the beginning of decline of civilization. No one asks why anymore. No one knows how. People only know how to use something.
Mm.
And that idea stayed with me a long time, and it influences the way that I think. And so therefore, extending that kind of thought into the world right now as well. It's fine to say, okay, I'll use all these AI tools, which is fine, but I think it's equally important for people to understand how does it work, why does it work, and more importantly, what can it not do, why can't it do certain things, and to know the limitations as well. Um, at least I think that's an important.
Okay, very, very fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
So we still need the thinkers, we need the people who question, we need the people who go beyond utility into just understanding what's behind the utilization.
Yeah, and I think more people will need to do this because we are now talking about sort of machines becoming incredibly. See, sorry, just another example, right? 10 years ago, we were all using AI algorithms, but they
Mm,
were all being used in ways that were not directly interfacing with us. So it was used by your bank to detect some credit card fraud transactions and so on. Okay, but it didn't really change your daily lives. But the current revolution is entirely about changing the way humans and machines interface or interact with each other.
mm,
Um, and that is, that affects every one of us. And therefore, the inescapable future will be one where machines are more and more integrated into our daily lives. And therefore, at least I feel, it's not just a subset of people who have to think and understand why this works. I think all of us will want to know, hey, why does it work? Where does it not work? And
mm,
why is that? That's
mm.
very important.
That's the more
Because,
fundamental question.
yeah, because without that understanding, what you could end up doing is you could say, oh, the machine told me this, therefore I believed it. No, that's not a good enough reason, right? Like if the machine told you, if you understood its limitations, you would perhaps say, okay, maybe I shouldn't take medical advice from it right now, right?
Mm.
And that's probably more important for more people. You didn't have to worry about this 10 years ago because you didn't interact with a machine for these kinds of things. But
Mm.
we
Okay.
will.
So you're saying
We will.
even the everyday average person who's using these algorithms, using these models, should understand at least what the shortcomings are before you sort of blindly
Yes,
implement.
yes.
Okay.
There are degrees of understanding on the spectrum. Maybe some people understand the nth level of technical detail and the mathematics behind it,
Okay.
right? But I think everybody needs a certain basic level of education of what these machines do, why do they do it, why do they not, why
Mm.
where are their limitations, how, which, when, and so on and so forth.
Okay, okay, terrific. Okay, that's very helpful. Great words of caution. Since you brought up how teams and machines interact, when I was on your website, Soroco's website, on the sort of homepage, you talk about, the mission of Soroco is to find and fix the leading causes of friction hurting your business outcomes by learning how teams and machines interact. Now, embedded in this mission is a lot of depth. Uh, to break this down, firstly, how are teams and machines interacting, and how where do you see this evolving to in the future?
Got it. So here's the thing, right, Vibha. All of office work, which is what you do and I do, and we are probably doing on this call as well, and so on, right? Uh, Whether you're in a bank, retail company, it doesn't matter what company you're in, right? Work that gets done in office almost entirely is done on a computer system, right? You use software, and on this, you may execute some processes, you may use an AI model, you may do whatever else, and so on. And if you think about this, right, over the last 40 years, the world has spent a lot of time and effort and money digitizing work. That means putting all this work onto the machine.
Mm,
But as a result of that, um, but as a consequence of that, I would argue that we actually don't really understand how work happens in the office, because work fundamentally happens when humans and machines interact with each other. I may get some invoice from a vendor, I read it, and then I go into some portal, enter some data, then I send some email, whatever, various activities like this. And so therefore there has not been any rigorous scientific way of truly understanding the last mile of how work happens in offices, because the last mile is entirely between the human and the machine, and it's that interface that we don't really understand. And the best guess that we've had so far is, I mean, you went to HPS, I'm sure many of your friends are consultants now, and consultants will come and they'll talk to people and ask, oh, okay, what's going on, etc. They'll ask some questions and they'll infer saying, okay, maybe this is what is affecting the company and the team, do this, do that. And I think what my colleagues and I realized a few years ago is, hey, if you can tap into this last mile interaction between humans and machines, and basically that's how work gets done in offices, you can actually very quickly and it's in a scalable way diagnose what is affecting the team's success. Where is the team experiencing friction? So friction, like for example, hey, this software that we have in our company is really not well done, and this is slowing our teams down. Or we don't have, there's not enough investment in training. Or hey, all day long I'm stuck doing really, small bits of work versus actually getting to my core. And these small bits should ideally be handled by a machine, not by me.
Mm,
Or hey, we are not able to collaborate well because these things are broken. Or our process that this company is following is actually broken, and the evidence for all of this ultimately shows up in the last mile interaction between the human and the machine. And
mm,
so our whole goal was, can we design an AI model that understands this interface between the human and the machine in the workplace? And then in turn says, okay, this is what is broken. This is how you can help the team succeed more. Today, teams don't really have that power or that ability of, except saying anecdotally, okay, this is bad or that's bad, right? And
mm.
at best, managers and senior leaders will hire consultants. We actually think we can do this a little differently. Um, and so that's kind of what we do.
Okay, so you're sort of kind of disrupting the consulting industry in many ways as well. But give me an example, or give me an example of something Soroco has done, and I know there's many on your website. Something that explains how an AI model is able to go into an organization and figure out this sort of gap in the last mile.
Sure. I wouldn't say we are necessarily disrupting consulting, but I would say we can accelerate what consultants do. That's probably the way to think about it. So I'll give you an example. So one of the largest companies on this planet, it's Fortune 10 company, which is our customer. Um, Speaking of AI, I'll deliberately give you an AI example. So they deployed an AI solution to their colleagues. They deployed it on a team which has 20 people, and they hope that it will really help them. It'll summarize a bunch of their work and take out a lot of the crud, and help the team be more streamlined. And when they deployed in 20 member team, it worked quite well, and everybody were happy. And then they scaled it up to about 2,000.
Mm,
And then it turns out that it stopped helping. And the general awareness and feedback was, oh, this isn't really helping me. And so their CXO said, look, what is going wrong? Why did this AI solution not scale?
mm,
Because it should have similarly streamlined the, many teams work, right? So now how do you answer this question? Because even if you hire people to go interview and so on, you're not going to solve this problem because you have 2,000 people in
mm,
40 different countries.
mm,
This is a, bigger problem. And so this is an example where they deployed our AI model called Scout across all these 2,000 machines. And Scout basically looked at how's the human and the machine interfacing with each other as they're getting their work done. And then it came back at our model and said, okay, here are all the reasons why your AI solution is not being used. Instead, this is what teams are doing. And they're doing this because the AI solution falls short in these four critical ways, in these specific business areas, and this is how it's hurting the team. And so it was therefore able to shed light on why their investments in AI were not working.
So you deployed this scout across various, you said 2,000 different people, 40 different countries, and
Yeah.
for a period of time, it sort of saw the dropout rate at which point people would stop using this AI.
Yes, and then it would what it would do is it would then understand, okay, so instead of using, for example, you could ask this AI solution to tell you about some customer and summarize information.
Mm,
Instead of using that, people are actually going into their classic portals and are finding the customer, then reading that customer details and so on.
mm, mm,
Why were they doing that? It
mm,
turns out the quality of the information that the AI tool provided was insufficient for people to get their work done at scale.
mm,
Uh, and all of this truth, the model was able to reveal.
Okay, wow, very fascinating, amazing work, and I'm fascinated by the company, and I'm going to keep an avid eye on everything that you're doing now because it's really fascinating to me. Um, with all this sort of automation coming, as you know well, there
Sorry,
are.
if I may add something, right? There's something very interesting, right, in the current iteration of this whole AI thing, and that is, It's changing how we all interface or interact with the machine. And so how do you know if it has worked, right? The real truth of knowing it's worked is the pattern of interactions that we have with machines change. And
Hmm.
that is where, the kind of data that we deal with and what our AI model is good at is turns out to be, very helpful. Because it's
Hmm.
fundamentally looking at the interface between humans and machines. So you're looking at what happened before, what happened after. Did the patterns change or not? Why did they change? Why did they not change? Where did they change? Where did they not change, etc. and so on. So that's what the model
And
ultimately
after
will
you
do.
tweak them, then what happened, etc., and what sort
Yeah,
of
exactly.
you're getting
So it's
now.
it's it's in fact our model now also does things like it even recommends saying this is where you should deploy AI and don't deploy AI here. So
Hmm.
it's an AI model telling you where to deploy AI models. So it's
Okay.
quite meta in that sense. So
Okay, awesome. Okay, now with companies like yourself doing sort of these seemingly magical things, right? What happens to the narrative on jobs? This is out there. Everyone's talking about it. Elon Musk says there'll be no jobs in the future. There are people who say, "Hey, wait a minute, this is only going to increase employee productivity. Actually, we're going to become a more productive globe per se." So, where are you on this spectrum, and why?
I'm somewhere, well, I guess it's easier to be in the middle than one of the two extremes. Uh,
I mean, because what you are doing is fundamentally disruptive, right? It is, from what I've understood, it is going to take away a few jobs, but it's also going to increase productivity. So,
no, look, I mean, there's one inevitable truth, right, which is the history of the Industrial Revolution has been a history of increasing productivity for the
sure.
last 250 years. Um, the automated loom to pretty much anything else, um, to the computer, to cars. You should see how many in New York City. I mean, you'd see pictures in the early 20th century. There were no cars, right? There were horses and carriages and people to clean horses, people to pick up the dung of the horses on the streets. Clearly, when cars came, those jobs morphed into something else, right? In some sense, first, I think we should have that frame, which is all technological advance, and we should never pretend like that's not the case. All technological advance does mean a change in productivity, and a change in productivity invariably
That's what
means,
they're saying about the fifth one, right? They're saying that now this current revolution that we're going to sort of at the cusp of between fourth and fifth is actually going to be different from the previous ones because it might actually take away jobs. Because for now, apparently the machines are behaving like humans, which we've never seen before.
yeah, I mean, I think I I don't know if I would take that to the logical end conclusion just yet. Perhaps that's what will happen. Okay, perhaps I don't know. As I said, that's why I'm always hesitant to forecast the future. But sitting where we are today, it is also undeniably true that machines can do. I mean, by the way, if you're in the manufacturing world, this truth came to life like 30, 50 years ago. I mean, 40, 50 years ago, right? You had robots starting to do all kinds of things, insanely high productivity. I mean, if you go to any of the assembly lines today, a significant chunk of it is done by robots, not by humans. That was not the case 100 years ago. But I think for the first time, we're experiencing machines do things that people sitting in offices are doing. And suddenly it's the office workers who are saying, oh no, there's some new reality here.
Hmm.
And I do think, for example, if you're doing something like if you're a legal analyst who is reading lots of documents and summarizing them, doing some research, I either we are already there or we will be there in the next 12 months. A machine will do this approximately well enough. Does that mean it eliminates the legal analyst job? I don't yet know if that's the case, but it certainly will dramatically cut the time and effort they need to spend
Hmm.
doing some of these things. And it's not just this, right? Almost in every industry, the junior most level kind of work patterns, I think a machine will start to do. I'm not claiming in every industry, but perhaps in most industries, because I see these patterns in the work that we do or in the companies that we work with and so on.
Okay.
So I think there is some truth to it. The only reason I don't yet know if I would go to the extent of saying all jobs is I still think we human beings still have some X factor that makes us creative, that makes us every human being, right? That adds something that's a little different. We haven't yet necessarily figured out how to do that with machines. But who knows? That itself may change,
Okay.
right? I mean, just to give you an example, yeah. So you take ChatGPT, right? I mean, I'll greatly simplify it for your listeners. Um, the reason it turns out that this thing produces text that looks quite creative is when it picks the next word, it can pick, it looks at the last, whatever, let's say 1,000 words, and then based on that, it shortlists the next word. It could be one of five or one of 10, let's say. And then it picks one of these words at random. That's
Mm,
the key.
mm,
It's picking there's a little bit of randomness in the next word that is picked. I'm giving a highly, like a middle school version of how this works, right? So then that leads to some philosophical question saying, is creativity that we humans really value, is that really some kind of a random function? Is that
mm,
what it really is? Is it really randomness to a limited scale? If so, are machines simulating creativity by being a bit random? Is that what it is? I mean, I found that question philosophically deeply, interesting. So who knows?
mm.
Um,
Okay.
Sorry, I
Okay.
don't think I gave you a definitive answer of zero or
No,
one,
no,
but
but
I also don't know.
embedded in your one answer were many, many answers, or rather
Yeah.
many questions to think about. But thank you for that. Uh, since you come from a very young age, you've seen the Indian outsourcing boom. It happened in front of you. If you've been part of it in many ways, what do you think is going to happen to the larger picture of these Indian IT services and all the people deployed in them as AI and automation come and sort of is able to do these sort of jobs? Will there be a redundancy created, or do you think you will see these larger companies retraining their employee base to newer technologies, and then they will need people to do sort of AI based training, train the models, train the LLMs, develop SaaS products out of the of AI, and therefore these industries will remain robust with a different lens. What do you think will happen?
Yeah, I think all of this train the models business is basically you're training the models to replace you. And so I don't know how, I mean, I'm saying something slightly
We are
broader.
training the models to replace us, yes, for sure.
Yeah, and so I don't know how quote unquote sustainable that business really is. I don't know. Right. And I don't see training in the long run, training the models as being that kind of, maybe that will be the case. We have to see, is that high value added work that, because what will happen is training the models is what? Okay, there's an image, for example. Okay, in this image, here's Vibha, here's Rohan. Okay, I have a feeling that the rates for those kinds of things will only plummet.
Mm,
That's not going to go up, right? So I don't know. But I think your question is valid in the sense that there is in IT services, it's the same thing that I said. I picked a legal analyst. It's the same thing that holds true here as well. I think there is a certain class of activities that are being done, certainly in things like BPO. See,
mm,
if you have to break the IT service into two parts, right? There are things where people build new code, new systems, maintain systems, extend systems, and there's another part where people just do transactional work. That's BPO.
mm,
I think in BPO you will definitely see a dramatic productivity increase, because whenever people are dealing with documents and this and that and so on, all of it text, right? You just keep asking you. That's why you apply the text thing that I said, right? The text
no
filter.
work. Yeah.
What fraction of people are doing work where they have to deal with text? It turns out a large fraction. A
Mm,
large fraction of people whose, a significant fraction of their time is spent on text. So for sure, there will be a dramatic change in productivity. I believe that. Um, and in the classic vanilla IT services where people build new systems, etc., and so on, even there, I think there'll be a dramatic increase in productivity. Now, the question then becomes, do you therefore need as many people? Do you get higher rates? I think
mm.
this we'll have to see.
Or do you
I do not,
retrain and reskill these people into doing something else?
yeah, but now there it comes down to this, right? So if you train models, I don't know. Is that higher margin, higher rate work? I don't know if it is.
Mm,
So what else do you do, right? If you're a person writing code, well, then you'll become more productive, and the more productive you become, either you do more volume of work or you need fewer people, one of the two.
mm. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's see what how that piece evolves. In all this, right? In all this AI, and is there, there were very recently there were many deep fakes published here in India, and when you looked at the images, they looked identical, right? And when I did interviews with people from the music industry, film industry, they're deeply concerned about voice getting replicated, images getting replicated, etc. Legally, it can happen. Cybersecurity is a big concern. Where do you see the ethics of AI evolving to, and what sort of legal, political, governance sort of frameworks do you think are essential as we move forward?
Well, that's the holy grail question. I don't know if in the confines of this discussion we answer that well enough.
Okay.
Uh, but it's undeniably true that I mean, look, all of these models, as of today, still they all operate on a principle of computing, GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out, which is these models are only as effective as what you train them on.
Hmm.
These the inferences that these models make are entirely based on what you train them on. And so the subjective truth or or the accuracy or the correctness or the whatever else that the model produces is entirely based on what we humans decide the model should learn. If
Hmm.
you train the model to call you train the model by labeling every single cat as a dog, well then the model thinks a cat is a dog, right?
Hmm.
um, and so you can easily imagine if you train the model on matters pertaining race, religion, gender,
Correct.
etc.,
Yeah.
done a certain way.
And there's a
It's
lot
not
of
that
different
these
things happening already, right? You're seeing this.
yeah, often though I'm seeing people say things like, oh, there's this model that produced racist things. Well, no, the model didn't. The training data that the human decided to train it on, right? The algorithms that they implemented. Actually, I think the control and the fundamental blame for this lies with humans. Because it's not like the model is making up some arbitrary inferences and creating new knowledge and this and that, at least not yet.
You were to give advice to like let's say a new AI committee is formed, let's say in the US, India, China, the larger economy, say, hey, we're setting up this committee. Rohan Murthy, please come and advise us on governance and how we should think about AI models. What words of caution would you give them, saying, hey guys, here's the lens in which I would suggest you see this if you're framing policy? What's your advice to policymakers?
So, well, okay, I've not really, I mean, that's a good question. With I think there are probably a few things. One is uh, certainly around education. I think there has to be a whole new bare minimum education that needs to happen everywhere as to not what everything the machine produces is correct, is accurate, is representative of reality,
Mm,
and understanding the limitations and so on. What I referred to earlier on, I think there needs to be at a minimum that needs see you can have all of this regulation and safety and so on only after people understand the limitations of this thing, only after there's a widespread. So if someone says, hey, this thing is generated by an AI model, right? If there's that kind of a cigarette label warning, and today, if you and I, right, if you read that on a cigarette thing, that cigarette can kill you from lung cancer. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, we
stay
know
away.
that's not good at least, right? So there has to be some such, and it's not just labeling this, right? It is then educating people. I think it has to start in school curriculum to adults to everybody. Society as a whole needs to learn, and I
Mm,
think that needs to be a state policy in my view,
mm,
as to what AI can do, cannot do, etc., and so forth. Now, what that does is when people start including these systems in critical parts like medical decisions or I don't know, policy decisions, or hopefully not army decisions, I don't know, etc. and so on. So people start to realize, hey, okay, I need to be cautious here. This thing doesn't mean just
mm.
because it said you have something or it says, okay, I should attack here or whatever else and so on. I should be very cautious because these could be incorrect inferences. This could be based on data that has been fed. Maybe that data is not complete or whatever else and
The
so on.
limitations should be evident to the consumer.
Limitations, yeah, and what is the relationship between the output and what is it trained on, etc., and so on, right? And I think there's a whole gradation of education needs to happen here, right? Like imagine somebody receives a diagnosis from an AI model that you have cancer. I don't even know if that you should be. taking that as necessarily as ground truth,
Mm.
right? And there are different, and depending on your own level of exposure, maybe some people think, yeah, okay, maybe the input data was not right. Not everybody will think that way. So, what are the right gradations of being able to understand, interpret, and therefore infer and live with output from AI models?
Mm.
To me, that feels like it has to be a necessary state policy. Then there are, of course, many other things around it as to how you can use that information, that data, what warnings, etc., and so on. But to me, it, it, it everything starts with this first point of view of education, of understanding the limitations of it. Um,
Mm.
so that's probably where I would start.
Mm. Wow. Okay. Wow. Very,
Because
very.
by the way, even today, okay, in our own organization, like our marketing team, I was saying to them, hey, you should be using these models for dramatically improving your productivity when you're like writing content. But then we've had to do workshops with everybody saying, okay, when you give information to this model, don't just take its output and copy paste it, because no, right? You need to read it, you need to understand it, and then you need to be able to say, okay, this part looks okay, this part does not. So I now need to intelligently graft what it says with my own writing and then make it flow straight and so on. So it isn't as simple as you just take it, lift and shift it. Not yet,
Not yet.
right?
Okay.
Not yet,
So
right?
you're seeing human intelligence still playing a decent role in this space. And for in terms of policy, you said mass education, like trying to educate populations and mass in terms of their understanding of the limitations of AI is critical.
Its
And
possibilities, its limitations, how it works, where does it not work well? Yeah, because you now
potentially
have a new.
labeling, you said you should also label as AI generated. This is AI generated.
Yes, yes, yes. But then it's, see, the labeling is easy. But now, okay, so what if it is labeled, right? Now,
Mm,
what do I, as a common citizen, what do I learn from it, right? What should I be careful about, right?
mm,
Now, for example, it could mean very different things in medical. It could be very different things in, different industries as well,
mm.
and so on.
Oh,
But I always see this. I don't know, maybe because my background is academia, I view everything as an education problem, but I certainly view this as an urgent education problem.
okay.
Because we've never had machines where we could interface with them in this way, right? Like, I mean, it's now a undergraduate student project. To give you a sense, Vibha, when you went to college or I went to college, actually you went to CMU, right? And so CMU pioneered this stuff, and later on Stanford. Back then, it was a very advanced project of building self-driving cars. Started at a lot of these universities, and now there are companies building a very basic self-driving car in a video game
Mm,
today is a first-year undergraduate project or nearly a high school project, which is insane,
crazy. Mm,
right? Now, building an AI model that can record 30 seconds of your voice and then make something seemingly sound like you and say anything else is a second-year undergraduate project or a second or third-year undergraduate project. I
mm,
mean, what that means is some kid in some dorm room can just do anything,
correct.
right?
Mm.
And that is a very different kind of reality that we're going to live in now.
Hmm. And
And
this is just the beginning, right? The SaaS product market hasn't still exploded. Once AI, SaaS product backed with AI
it'll
explodes,
come. Yeah, yeah, it'll come.
coming, and then
It'll
it'll
come.
just change the dynamic
Yeah.
entirely, right?
And so that's why to me the thing is it's machines interfaces with humans have dramatically, to me, that is a revolution now.
Mm,
And if that's the case, then all of us humans need to know more and more about, hey, what is this machine? What is it doing? Maybe this is real, maybe it's not real,
mm.
right? Etc. and so on. So
Okay.
it's
Now, last question on AI, and then we'll move towards skills, etc. What happens, Rohan, in this sort of world where machines are interacting with human beings? We still don't know how many jobs will be replaced, productivity, etc. What happens to income inequality? There's so much talk about this income inequality and these gaps, right? Do you see a world where those with this sort of education, understanding, information, access, and now instead of a wealth gap, you see a knowledge gap that then leads to a wealth gap where it's this one sort of educated literati that becomes sort of the wealthy of society, and then the rest are just general consumers potentially being exploited, lack of understanding, etc. And then it's that education slash knowledge gap that now leads to an even wider gap. Or do you see this gap reducing and saying, hey, now everyone will have access to technology, so we'll all be better off, and hence the world will be sort of more equitable? What do you see evolving?
I mean, it's a very good question. Um, Let me not say the stuff that people have already said, right? Like in the sense that people have talked of a robot tax and an AI tax and this and that.
And UPI.
I'm not saying I don't necessarily believe those things. I'm just saying I think that people have expounded on those things sufficiently. Um, I have mixed views on this because I myself don't know. Um, there is a part of me that thinks exactly what you said, which is there will be this incredibly this kind of world divided into two groups. One group that are building these AI models, really understand them, can make these models do crazier and crazier and crazier things. And the consequence of those models is that they're gobbling up more and more and more parts of the world.
Mm.
And so you have one elite group, and then there's everyone else. I mean, in some sense, that's what computing also has been like, right? Like there's been one elite group and there's been else, but this AI thing may only make it more exaggerated. That's that's my vein of thought. Okay.
Mm.
But then in the use of it, on the other hand, I also see it bring a certain consistent leveling experience. Um, I actually, again, I'm obsessed with education. I keep thinking of education. Um, that no matter who you are, where you are, as long as you have access to a device, uh, whether you're a kid in India or a kid somewhere else in Vietnam and etc. and so on, everybody will get access to very similar
Correct.
knowledge in similar
Correct.
ways,
So that's the conundrum. Now, this is
right?
the conundrum, right? Which one do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Um, but but by the way, the former I think is certainly very true. That
Former more
and by
likely,
the way,
we can.
yeah,
Former.
and it's by the way, it's not any because of any bad reason. It's just that this is an incredibly advanced, complicated thing to do. Skill
Mm,
sets are not easy. They're in rare demand. And it turns out when you really put a bunch of these people together, they can produce these models that are doing insane things,
mm.
that will affect the rest of humanity. And that's just a fact.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Last two.
I don't want to give that Silicon Valley view of how, okay, we produce a model, now the world will be better for it, we're changing the world. No, no. I mean, it's not clear to me that it's necessarily that rosy a view.
Uh-huh.
Right? There are positives, certainly,
So,
but also at the same time, I think these other concerns around. It's the first time that in my living life I have seen technology do something that has made me think so seriously about, oh my God, what will this mean
mm.
for humans?
For humanity,
Um,
yes, exactly.
yeah, I have never felt that way thus far, but perhaps it's the first
That's why
time.
we're writing the book, because it sort of seems like this is fundamentally going to shift everything, But if you come back on a view on this question, then ping me later at some point and we can talk
Okay,
about it.
okay.
Okay, last two questions. I know you have to go. Top three skills for the future. If you talk to your people at your company, if you talk to young people, what do you think are futuristic? So just any, it could be hard skill, soft skill, anything. Top three skills.
Well, in my opinion, regardless of AI and no AI, I think the most the most important skill, that's a time invariant skill, uh, is learning how to learn. Um, I think that has always been needed and has never gone away. Um, the reason I sort of say that's an important skill is, I mean, today it's AI, tomorrow it's something else, tomorrow it's something else or whatever. But being able to, you know, um, roll your sleeves up and say, okay, I will learn. What does this mean? How does it work? What can I do with it? What do the fundamentals mean, etc., and so on. Having that confidence and that ability to learn, I think, is probably one of the most important skills. So in our company, we have lots of PhDs, and then we have engineers who don't have PhDs, and many of the young engineers don't have PhDs. But one day saying to all the PhDs, saying, "Oh man, you guys have all PhDs, and we don't," and so on. So I explained to them. I said, "No, no, look, all that a PhD means is that you're really an expert in some weird, super niche area, okay? And whether that's useful or not is questionable. But more importantly, I said, look, the only difference is that what the PhD did is it give you confidence that, okay, it doesn't matter what the problem is. I can start from the basics. I may not become the expert in this other new area that I'm trying to learn about, but I learn it well enough to be able to solve a problem or make some progress and be familiar with. And I think that to me is a very important skill. Not to suggest that PhDs are the only way of learning it, right?
Mm, mm,
But um, uh, but I think that's a very, very, very important skill because that's invariant across any kind of any kind of advance that happens, you learn about AI, you learn about, I know, blockchain, you learn about virtual reality. Who
Because
cares?
anyway, because the world is sort of set to change and no one really knows. Like it seems like as long as you know how to learn, you can pretty
Yeah,
much learn the next technology, the next whatever sort of hits your face. If you're
yeah,
open and adaptive, you learn whatever comes your
yeah.
way.
The second is communication and or articulation.
Okay.
I still think that will not go away. Uh, Whether you use an AI model to help you or not is secondary, but
GPT is it's telling me how to write my emails, it's correcting my
uh,
speech, it's doing everything.
yes, but even then, right? Like at the end of the day, you and I are still talking, no, Vibha.
Hmm.
There's not an AI model that's talking in your behalf or my behalf.
I don't know. I don't know if it's you or your hologram in front of me. It's
Okay, as of right now, you're right. You're right. You're right. Right. But the reason I like, for example, right, like uh, when I interact with a lot of young engineers or kids in India, I feel in our own system, this is not a focus. We are very bright kids, but there is insufficient
Hmm.
focus on communication and articulation, being able to write well, being able to communicate well, being able to frame your thoughts. Often people have the right ideas, but they're not able to communicate it well. This is perhaps the second one.
Why do you see that as a skill for the future?
Because I think as long as there are humans, I think isn't one of the key that things that all human beings need to do with each other is to be able to communicate with each other,
Hmm.
right? I think that's again a time invariant skill.
Hmm.
See, I don't worry about it as future, past, and so on, because when I think of skills, I largely tend to think of what are skills that you will probably always need, no matter what.
Hmm.
Um, and see, I'm deliberately not talking about, okay, you should know AI, you should know programming and this and that. I just assume these kinds of things will happen, okay?
Sure. Okay, fine.
But I don't find enough of this second thing.
Okay. So learning to
Um,
learn communication, what's your thought?
um, I don't have a third that I can think of right now.
Okay.
I mean, I can think of things, but I don't know if they are skills. See, let me say it this way, right? Like, um, I don't know if this is a skill, but I'll nonetheless say it. This is the thing that's always on top of my mind. Um, we produce lots of engineers in our country, which is great. Um, or we produce whatever doctors, etc. But I think having a humanistic view of the world, not just a technical view of the world, is equally important.
Hmm.
Um, right? That means,
Hmm.
yeah, you should be an engineer, but you should have also read some Indian classics. You should have read poetry.
Hmm.
You should watch plays,
Or studied classical
or
music.
whatever it is. Yeah, yeah, right. Something that gives you a broader perspective of life than beyond our own the limited areas that we all study or work on.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a skill,
So
but
are you
maybe
going
that
more towards being interdisciplinary in nature, or are you
I
going more?
don't like to use that word because often I think that word diffuses this. Like, for example, if I have to be a computer scientist, I have to be an A plus computer scientist.
Hmm.
But I have to be an A plus computer scientist who can also appreciate the nuances of, hey, my invention may have some ethical issues, my invention may have philosophical issues, my invention may have historical issues, right?
Hmm.
So I should be able to at least think through or reason about or appreciate these other dimensions as well,
Hmm.
right? So I'd rather say it that way because I personally am not a fan of the word interdisciplinary because often I feel that what interdisciplinary has led to, the word has led to, is a diffusion
Hmm.
and therefore lack of expertise in anything. It's like I'm a jack of all trades and I really don't know anything about anything, right? But having a more mixing our expertise with a little bit more humanistic values and education is, I think that results in some skill. I don't yet know what that skill is, but that's probably my third uh,
Okay.
favorite thing.
Fine. Okay. Last question. If you had to go back to college, knowing everything you know today, let's flashback. You're in high school, you make your degree choice. I know you did Cornell Computer Science, but if you had to today make that decision, if you were applying early decision November 1st now, what would you be applying for?
Um, well, I'll tell you what I did and what I would do differently. When I applied to college, I was very inspired by my uncle, my mama. So I thought, oh yeah, I'd also do astrophysics. I do
This is the
mathematics,
character
and
professor, the same one.
yeah, I do. I actually think the most fundamental disciplines are actually not computer science. The most fundamental, if one wants to do anything in engineering or science, I think they should do things at the intersection of physics and mathematics.
Mm,
Um, and computer science, I actually think is an easy discipline, in my opinion.
mm,
Easier discipline compared to these, because when you study mathematics and physics, you study mathematics as a universal truth. Doesn't matter which part of the universe you go to, it's still true. And physics is a description of reality or trying to understand reality. And they're so foundational that if you study these two things,
mm,
um, you can, and picking up computer science on top of this, I think is not difficult. I'm not trying to trivialize my field. I just think these are more fundamental fields. From
mm,
there, if you want to be anything. You could want to be a biologist, you can be a biologist. You want to be a computer scientist, you can be a biologist, computer scientist. You want to be a
mm.
whatever applied physics engineer, you can be anything.
So
I think these are,
foundational. It's a strong
I think
foundation.
they're extremely strong foundational fields. Yeah. Um, like for example, all of these advancements in AI, right? All of it is based on being able to understand mathematics well and being able to do mathematics well and reason about mathematics well. And I think people who do math and physics are primed for doing these kinds of things, in my opinion. I'm only saying this in my context. If I could go back and redo my education, um, though I actually took a lot of math and physics courses, I think I would have taken even more. And beyond just the ordinary ones, I would actually have taken the even sort of more the harder ones and so on. I think it would certainly help. Um, but having said that, um, I still took, like, I took 6 or 7 courses in game theory. I took every imaginable course in linear algebra. I took graduate courses in dynamical systems, etc., which had nothing to do with my degree. I took them because I was just interested, and I think they've really helped me. Not that the specificities have helped me, but they've given me confidence and a frame of mind to be able to say, okay, it doesn't matter what the problem is, as long as it's mathematical, I know how to address it. Um, but the thing I didn't do well enough that I wish and I absolutely would do better is the last point that I said to your previous question. I did not have any appreciation for
For
a
the
broader
humanity.
perspective on education. I remember being in college and they said, oh, you have to do so many courses in liberal arts. And I was like, man, what a complete waste of time.
Mm,
Because I'd come from India, right? I thought my only role was to do more and more technical things. Yeah, I'm like, math course, I'll do. Computer science course, I'll do. Heck, okay, physics, I'll do. But why do I have to do philosophy? That just sounds like an utter waste of time.
yeah,
And I remember being deeply annoyed and trying to cut corners and do like the easiest ones when I was an
yeah,
undergrad.
yeah.
And that was a very big mistake that I made. I attempted to make up, I realized it, I think, around the time of my graduation. So when I went to do my PhD, I literally did everything in reverse because in PhD, everybody were like hyper focused in their own department.
Specializations. Mm.
So instead, what I started to do as a PhD student, I used to go to colloquia talks in history, in economics, in philosophy. I ended up taking several graduate courses in philosophy as a PhD student in
Oh.
computer science. I ended up taking several graduate courses in divinity, in all kinds of other areas. So I did it in reverse, and it gave me I think it made me a better computer scientist.
Mm.
But um, in my own case, because I had the opportunity and privilege of being able to go to a very good school in the US, and I think it's an utter privilege for anyone who has the opportunity to do that. The advice I give everybody is, yeah, do your technical or whatever you want to do that well. Like if you're doing history, please, for heaven's sake, please take some math and programming courses as well, equally well, right? But have a slightly broader perspective. So
Oh, okay, awesome. This was terrific. Rohan, thank you so much for doing this.
great,
I think the
great, no
conversation
problem.
was candid, very smooth. You kept it sort of very real, speedy with all your examples, and just very natural. So this has been very, very helpful. I think this makes for the best conversations and best recordings. So
Great.
absolutely terrific pleasure to have had this conversation. And thank you so much again for sparing your time.